Welcome back, everyone, to another amazing BritTrack virtual panel. My name is Robin the Hat. You may know me from such amazing panels as Doctor Who, Where to Start, and the Vogon Poetry Slam from last year. This year, we have another cracker for you, the Doctor's greatest nemesis, the Master at 50. Once again, my name is Robin the Hat. I'm the Assistant Director of the BritTrack. Joining me are a bevy of amazing panelists, starting with Michael Faulkner, podcaster and writer on the Timestamps Project, a weekly, week-by-week, story-by-story look at Doctor Who that started in 2014. Michael, say hi.
Hello, how are you guys today?
All right, and then right next to him, we have Sue Kisenweather, co-host of Women at Work on the Roddenberry Podcast Network, exploring intersectional diversity and infinite combinations. Say hello, Sue.
Hi, everybody.
All right, and then underneath me, we have Rob Levy, Doctor Who writer for Anglotopia.net, NeedCoffee.com, and several anthologies. Hello, Rob.
Hey, have we met?
Somewhere. Yeah, out
thank
in the
you.
Ethersphere.
Thank you for having me, and it's good to see all of you guys.
All right, and then the mysterious man in black right underneath Michael is Dr. Scott Vu, Dr. Geek of Dr. Geek's Laboratory. Say hello, Brian. Scott.
Hello, everyone.
And then last but definitely not least, we have Brian Doob, Brian from the British Invaders podcast. Brian, say hello.
Hi, folks.
All right. We are going to be talking about the Master at 50. We're going to start with his actions on the television show. They're going to move on to some other media, such as books, audios, and then some outre streaming videos that you may have heard. So we're going to start with the Master's Adventures with the Third Doctor, which is where we first met him canonically in the series. Michael, what was your first experience with the Master and the Third Doctor?
Well, since I've been going, in order, episode by episode, it was with, his introduction in the Terror of the Autons, and I absolutely fell in love with Roger Delgado and his interpretation. There's been, in the classic era, no better Master, in my opinion. Like, he was just fantastic. And I know this will warm Caro's heart, but the Sea Devils is one of my favorites there, just because it is a great story. But as she says time and time again, there's also some sword fighting. There's some fencing going on in there. It's awesome to see that action set piece as well. I love that era with the Master and the Doctor.
I'm glad you mentioned the fencing because I had totally forgotten about that. That's good.
Damn it.
All right. And we're going to go to the Miss Sue Kisenweather. Sue, what was your favorite experience with the Third Doctor and the Master?
Oh, it's got to be the Sea Devils. Similar to Michael, I did not go in order, but several years back, I used to do a podcast called Moments of Who. And it was a review show, but when in the off season, we would go back and watch some classic Who. And this was the story that was voted on by the listenership. So we went back and did a deep dive into the Sea Devils, and it was a lot of fun.
Excellent. All right, then we're going to start proceeding again in clockwise order with Brian Doob.
Yeah, so wonderful portrayal from Roger Delgado. We talked about the beginning in Terror of the Autons, which was great. I'm going to say Frontier in Space, his last appearance, was fantastic. And special shout out to his chemistry with Joe Grant, played by Katie Manning, which was something really special in the series at that point.
You are absolutely right, Brian. That's my favorite Third Doctor Master episode as well. I would go back and watch that repeatedly. Dr. Scott Vu, give us your opinion on the Third Doctor and the Master.
Well, first off, when I started watching Doctor Who, my first episode was the War Games. So the Third Doctor was the very next week on the PBS channel that I was watching. So very early on, Roger Delgado was very much part of the whole Doctor Who experience for me. And I immediately picked up on the kind of Moriarty-Holmes relationship that they had and all that sort of stuff. And given the fact that we had just learned a little bit about Time Lords only a few weeks back, it was kind of cool for him to have somebody like that to make it worth, to add to the threat, really. Because if the Doctor's going to be trapped on Earth and being an advisor, I mean, how boring can that be? They could have made that, really, really super easy. So actually having a villain of his, caliber really made that era a lot of fun. And it could not have happened without Roger Delgado.
He was brilliant.
Yeah.
And Rob Levy, give us your take on that relationship.
Well, like Scott, our PBS station showed him. I'm going to throw a curveball on this. I apologize. Showed who, but we got him in order. So we had Tom Baker, then they ran Tom Baker, then they ran Tom Baker, and then went to Davison, and then after one of the ends of Davison, they started. We were the first station in St. Louis was the first station in PBS to get the Hartnell package. So we started all the way over from Hartnell. So Terror of the Autons is the first sort of incarnation of myself. However, at the time, I had read him the Daemons in the Target book. So I love the Sea Devils. I know we've talked about this a lot, and the swashbuckling stuff of that. In the book, it's great. On screen, it's even better. But I read the Daemons first because I knew that, but then I saw him on TV in Autons. And I love the fact that it's bookended each time. He's equally scary, because the great thing about the Delgado Master is he is just as scary in your imagination, in your head, that he is on screen. And I think that really seals the deal for how great he is. He's still my favorite Master. I just think that the chemistry with him and John, and like you said, with Joe and other different characters, is really, really good. And what he does with his eyes, no other actor in Doctor Who has done with his eyes what he does. And you see a lot of that in Damon's. You see some of it in Mind of Evil, and you see some of it in Terror of the Autons. So, yeah, there you go.
That's awesome. I have to say, and I'm going to pick a new episode, my favorite Delgado and their Doctor combination is the Claws of Axis. Because that one, you can see kind of the gentlemanly competition. They haven't gotten to the whole murderous Sound of Drums Master that we see, or even the decayed version that we see in the Doctor's next regeneration. But they still could be friends, or at least compatriots. And when the Doctor made that deal with the Master to get off planet because his TARDIS wasn't working, you could almost believe that he would go through with that, and that he was actually tempted to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Especially being while being confined to Earth, they have a lot more in common than they do not. So that it could have gone either way.
Yeah,
and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that it added to the sting of the Doctor defeating him was the fact that the Master could leave at any time, while the Doctor couldn't.
Yeah.
All right, now I'm going to pose a question to the group, and I just thought of it while everyone was talking. We talked about the just learning about the Time Lords, the episode before John Pertwee premiered, but he's not the first. The Master's not the first of the Doctor's people to appear in the series. We have the Meddling Monk. So, what do you think compares and contrasts the Master to other Time Lords that we see, as particularly the Meddling Monk, throughout the early part of the series? And we'll go in reverse order this time. Rob?
I'm glad you mentioned the Meddling Monk, because I friggin' love the Meddling Monk. And Time Meddler is one of my favorite Hartnells. I think that, if we put this in context, if this were Saved by the Bell, the Master and the Doctor would be like Zach and Mario Lopez, and that Meddling Monk would be Screech. He's like the guy who really wants to be cool, but he's not. That's the weirdest context I've made with no sleep. I apologize, but I think the most interesting contrast is, before we get to the Master, we see with the Meddling Monk and even the Time Lords in War Games, they're kind of like, okay, they're Time Lords. They're kind of dumb, right? Like our version of the Time Lords is like, they're kind of odd and weird and strange. They are certainly not diabolical, right? You clearly believe up until you see the Delgado on screen that the Time Lords are rather benevolent and kind of fuddy-duddy. And then you get a guy who is like the intellectual equal of the Doctor, who can play the long game like the Doctor, and who has this like ruthless streak of either killing people or using people or manipulating people that is as equal as the Doctor's kindness. And I think that really makes him scary. So I think it's a nice contrast. I don't believe they were really thinking of the meddling monk when they were making the Master. I think they just realized, like, the Moriarty. I think it was more Moriarty than Monk. But I think that it is an interesting contrast, because up until then, the Time Lords were all kind of wishy-washy and kind of dull. And I mean, the War Chief is kind of scary, don't get me wrong. And I think if we flesh that out, he probably could be. But I think he's more bureaucratic scary, whereas I think the Master is just flat out, just like, I don't want to get on this guy's bad side. I think that's very obvious right away. And I think he does a really great job within the first 30 seconds of him being on screen of just being really scary.
Excellent point. Dr. Scott, do you have anything to expand on that?
Oh, sure. By the way, I love Rob's analogy. That's going to stick in my head for a while. It's awesome. With the portrayal of the other Time Lords up to this point, what it tells me is that Time Lord society was so regimented that there was no place for creativity or out-of-the-box thinking. And so when you have members of that society in such a controlled society, it's amazing. They all the one thing they all have in common is that they're all brilliant. How they use their brilliance is, what separates them from being villains to heroes and so forth, and stuff like that. But they're all the Ronnie, the Master, all the ones that we run into. They're all super geniuses, and they could all have been friends. It's just a matter of knowing that with great power comes great responsibility. But with Time Lord society, that means stay at home, monitor the universe, don't do anything. And how boring is that? And then whether or not, how can you escape that without becoming completely and utterly mustache twirling evil? I don't know, but I mean that's kind of like the mission for everyone who leaves Gallifrey is that they could do such great things, but then they get self-absorbed, I guess. But yeah, it's really, really cool, and I think it says a lot more about Gallifrey than it does about the individuals.
Ooh, excellent. All right. I'm going to open it up at this point. Brian, Sue, and Michael, do you all have anything to contribute to this?
On the meddling monk, the monk was really like a child. It was, if you give a child these toys that can change time, change history, what does a child do with it? Well, that was pretty well what the monk was. Where when you introduce the Master, especially in the earlier ones that Roger Delgado did, you have the really malevolent character, and as Rob said, the opposite of the Doctor. And that gives you something very different with this sort of doing things that are very wrong with complete awareness of that. So a very different take than you had earlier with the monk.
Excellent.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, we talk about how they're opposites, but really they're the opposite faces of the same coin. Yeah. Because I mean, the Doctor tells everyone in the Sea Devils that the Master was a very good friend of his at one point, and it would be very, very simple for the Doctors to flip that coin and become as evil as the Master, to exercise his power to do all these things the Master is doing in pursuit of his goals. And it's the nature of both of them that sets them apart, the good versus evil. But really they're effectively the same person. They're brothers, Yeah. And that's what really drives the power of the Master, even in the later incarnations that we see, because you have a sort of sympathy for him, he could be good, but he chooses to go down the bad path instead with all this power.
Yeah, the plan during the Pertwee era was to reveal that the Doctor and the Master were in fact brothers. And I think it's both a good thing that they had that idea. I think it put them on a good track, but it's also probably better that they didn't actually execute it.
Yeah.
Well,
that was unfortunately sidelined with the unfortunate death of Roger Delgado. And Sue, I'm going to give you the final word on the Third Doctor and the Master.
Sure. Well,
section.
Your posited question was the difference, right, between the meddling monk and the Master. And I think we've pretty much nailed it, but it's all about their intent, right? The meddling monk was out to make things better, at least in his view. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to improve things by giving people who shouldn't have technology certain technology. He wanted to, disrupt the temporal prime directive, as it were. But the master was ruthless, as Rob said, was malevolent, as Brian said. He wanted to see humans destroyed, and partly because he wanted it to hurt the Doctor so badly. So, they might be there to cause problems, to give our hero something to fight against, but their end goals were completely different.
Wow. Very good. Very well put. Thank you, Sue. We are going to move on to the next and probably the longest part of the Master's journey on the show, which is his search for a new regeneration cycle. We see him, the next time we see him after Frontier in Space is the Deadly Assassin, where he's decayed and skeletal and on the verge of death. Sue, you ended off the last time. Why don't you go ahead and bring us into this one?
Yeah, so one of the things I love about really long-running sci-fi series is that so much of what new shows do reference what the shows did years and years and years ago. So, when the Doctor was given this new set of regenerations very recently, lots of newer fans who didn't have the history, not their fault necessarily, complained about it, not knowing that there was this whole arc with the Master seeking this other set of regenerations. And that's what I really love about this storyline, right? And what I always want to tell people, when you've got any franchise with 40, 50 years of history, the creators are likely not making new stuff up. They're probably referencing stuff people made up 25, 30 years ago.
Yes, very good. Awesome. Michael, let's just expand on the Doctor's relationship with the Master in his fourth incarnation.
It's a relationship that it was interesting to watch. I wasn't a big fan of it just because of the decayed part. He's just out there as this kind of weird phantom menace kind of thing, and it's interesting because he's almost in a sense hiding from the Doctor, using that as a disguise to say, I can do all these things in the background. But it also adds a lot of wrinkles into the mythology, like Sue was kind of alluding to. We learn about the 13 life limit of the Time Lords, and then there's this extra wrinkle of, but you can get more. And it's the Master trying to figure out a way to do that. So it does a great job of bending that mythology and kind of making us question what we know to that point about the show itself, about the franchise, and about how the dynamics all work. I liked it better when we got Anthony Ainley in as a more physical Master. And I kind of get it. It feels like the Decayed Master was trying to say, Roger Delgado did a great job over here. We don't want to mess that up in any way. So we're not going to give him a face. We're just going to have, any actor get in there with this prosthetic on and be this face of kind of phantom evil. And then Anthony Ainley came in and he looked a lot like Roger Delgado. And he acted a lot like him, but he put his own spin on it too. And still with that quest of, I need more lives. I need more regenerations.
And just a quick shout out to the actors who played the Master, the Decayed Master, Peter Pratt and Jeffrey Beavers. Jeffrey Beavers actually went on to do a lot of Master audios for Big Finish, but we'll come to that in due time. Brian, give us a quick overview of what happened in The Deadly Assassin with the Master.
Yes, in The Deadly Assassin, what we start getting with the Master is this idea of him being unhinged, the sort of instability, if you will, insanity of the Master becomes much more prominent. There were hints of it with Delgado, but the idea of him being sort of detached from reality becomes much stronger at this point. And you get the idea of him having used up his regenerations. This was sort of a big revision to how Time Lord Society worked and made things a lot more interesting, and gave us these ideas about the Master being at the very last straw. He is holding on to his life by sheer willpower at this point, and paying a great cost for that. And that sort of goes on, I would say, for a long time.
Mm-hmm. In fact, Scott, we actually don't see the Master on the show for almost another 6 years.
Right.
Could you continue it from there, please?
Okay. Well, it's it's really interesting. The Master and the Doctor become not just rivals, but they really become titans in Doctor Who universe, right? To the point where decay is mentioned a lot in regard to the decayed Master, but also think about this: the universe itself has to go through decay with the Logopolis, and that signals the end of the Fourth Doctor's life and regeneration and so forth, and it just happens to coincide with the rebirth of the Master, and the two of them are more or less in sync from that point forward, as far as going after each other and and stuff like that, number of lives and all that sort of thing. So I find it interesting that if you are going to create a character like the Master, you can't retire it. It's too popular. It's really one of the best adversaries the character can have. So you have to. They gave it some rest with the fact that Roger Delgado had died and that he made such an impact. But it was time to bring him back, especially with, like I said, the regeneration of the program, with saying goodbye to Tom and hello to Peter and everything going forward. So it was a way of, I guess, validating, the Fifth Doctor a little bit too, by having him have a Master to go up against.
And what a Master it was! Anthony Ainley did a stellar job throughout the rest of the series. Rob, bring us into the modern of the classic series with Anthony Ainley.
So we've had Delgado, we've had Goldfish Eyes Master, and then one of the most. I mean, I love Deadly Assassin for lots of different reasons, other than what Michael said. I mean, outside of the Master, I love a lot of things about Deadly Assassin, but I also love a lot of things about Keeper of Traken, which I think is a really great sort of handoff episode, because subsequently you kind of almost have two Masters, right? You have this really creepy Master, and then you've got, this really sort of kind, gentle man. So you see a couple things going on here. You see the Master, still nuts, still crazy after all these years, and then you see this really kind, family guy, really nice guy. So you have the horror of seeing the Master back and plotting doom and destruction, but then you see him destroy, this perfectly loving, relationship with everyone in his village and a planet. So that's kind of the Anakin Skywalker moment of the whole thing, right? I mean, you sort of realize this is not going to go well, and then you get a little hint of what Ainley's going to be in Keeper of Traken, and then you get Logopolis, where you're kind of like, you have to look past what is going on here, and just boil it down to the relationship between Baker and Ainley. And he goes toe-to-toe with Tom Baker, which not a lot of people could do. He's probably the only human villain that worked almost really well toe-to-toe with Baker, and they have a great dynamic. But then he carries it over into the Davison era. So we get Castrovalva, and then we get that other one with the plane. That didn't happen. So we get, and then, you get King's Demons, he's incredible in the Five Doctors. You get him marvelous in Planet of Fire. And I think the interesting thing that bookends the Delgado and the Ainley Master is, we have the Delgado Master. We know what we're dealing with. It's the Moriarty Doctor thing, right? He leaves. I think that with the character, yes, the Master is clearly unhinged and he's nuts and he's crazy. But I think part of it is that he hasn't been near the Doctor for so long. Like all the time when the Master is near the third Doctor can technically kind of rein him in. He can kind of push the buttons. He can kind of do that. And he, it's kind of like he's got no handler almost. The Master is what the Doctor is like, or what the Master, the Master without the Doctor is like what happens when you don't have like, proper care or a handler, right? He doesn't have anybody to keep him in check. And that, to me, is the way that I try to reconcile that particular portrayal of the Master. Ainley kind of goes back to Delgado, keeps a tinge of the crazy, right? But brings back the nuanced sort of I'm a gentleman sort of way. And then they kind of started to write for him different, where they made him a little too over the top, which I don't necessarily love. And with the disguises and the anagrams. But I do think the Ainley Master that you see all the way in through Survival, Time in the Rani, he's great. Or Mark of the Rani, he's great. And I think he's every bit as good as each of the Doctors he faced. I think Ainley holds up with Davison and Colin and Sylvester all equally well. It works, which is a really hard thing to do. Is to sort of maintain that relationship on some level, make the viewer yeah.
So I was going to say, Ainley actually faced more Doctors than any of the other actors.
Yeah, I mean, he makes that relationship, believable. Whether you're watching him with Colin or Sylvester, or even, and especially in Trial of a Time Lord, you get this idea that like these people could probably both be in the same room together at one point and not hate each other, and I think the Ainley Master is kind of tragic in a way that the other ones aren't, because the first Doctor is very ruthless and very manipulative. The second Master is crazy. And then the Ainley Master he wants to be loved and he wants to be like king of the universe and he can't, and it drives him nuts. It eats him alive that he's not as good as the Doctor. And that's a whole new twist on the character.
Yeah,
that's a good point. In fact, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the guys. We're going to compare him with another Time Lord that the Doctor faced in this period, Omega. Yes, Omega appeared in the Three Doctors originally, but then he came back in Arc of Infinity. So there again, we have another Time Lord to compare the Master to. So what do we feel are the major differences between the Master and Omega? And we'll start with Sue.
Sue was not prepared for that question.
Well, then we will move on to Dr. Scott. Dr. Scott.
All right. So the difference is that Omega has literally been the king of his own universe. And so he's achieved everything that the Master ever set out to do. But the weight of that is nearly killing him, quite literally. So you should look. Omega should look at the Master and say, "Be careful what you wish for. You may get it." And that's basically that's Omega. But what I find interesting, and kind of to tack on to what Rob said just a moment ago, is that there is that sort of relationship between the Doctor and Omega, and the possibility that he's the other, and and all that sort of stuff. And so the Doctor's even more special to the society than the Master, and that might be a point of resentment, which we can mention later on. But it's the sort of situation where the Master, he keeps falling short. Like Rob says, he wants to achieve these goals. He sets out this great plan, and then it kind of falls apart time and time again. And he's almost self-defeating at some points. I mean, when he gets to Survival, I really don't understand what he thought his plan was with that. Time Flight, I can almost follow it. King's Demons, I can follow it. It's not the best plan, but it's a plan. But, Survival, can anyone explain to me what that one's about?
I actually think it has a very simple moral. Cheetahs never win.
And you are free to have that opinion.
Thank you. I'll be here all week. All right, so we're going to wrap up the Quest for a New Life and move on to the somewhat controversial trial and execution of the Master by the Daleks. Michael, can you give us a quick overview?
Well, all right. At some point, the Master is on trial by the Daleks for his evil, which it makes me wonder what exactly he did to make it so that the Daleks were the ones to stand up and say, that guy, not so good. He ends up getting executed, but his last request is for the Doctor to take his remains back to Gallifrey. And on the way, it somehow he's turned into this weird snake thing, and the Doctor ends up landing in San Francisco at the dawn of the new millennium, and the snake gets out, and it goes and finds Eric Roberts, and hilarity ensues, including including the Master trying to break the TARDIS to get again in the Eye of Harmony to get more regenerations as the quest has been. The thing about this Master, you can kind of follow the idea. I mean, setting aside the trial by the Daleks, that just does not make sense in my head. But it's like he has gotten rid of a lot of the other stuff we talked about and just gone pure insanity. Like everything else has failed. I want the new lives. I'm doing this. And he just dives right into it, embraces it fully, even to the point of almost killing the Doctor to make this happen.
After all, stealing lives is how he got the Anthony Ainley body. So this is body snatching is not new for this. And like you said, a trial by the Daleks. I'm a lawyer, and I appreciate science from fiction, but law from fiction makes even less sense. Who knows, man? But clearly it was all set up. I mean, and
that was framed. Yeah.
No. He wasn't. He deserved what he got. But I'm saying it's like he knew that he had a backup plan, and that's the one thing that's consistent with all the Masters is that this was an escape route from the very beginning, and that's the whole point of having the Doctor take the ashes and the whole thing. He knew that whatever he was about to do before he died, there was going to be a resurrection of some sort. And then, with the hope of going, well, hey, I can't defeat the Doctor, so I'll just take him over, and then therefore I win. But you can it makes more sense than some other plots. How it was executed for the telemovie. Well, okay. But I mean, if you put it on paper, you could see where they went. Well, okay, we take this element from this show, this element from this show. I mean, this is like what Sue was saying. The new writers were just looking at the history, going, well, we can body snatching, check. Never quite kill the villain, check. The body's decaying, triple check. There we go. I mean, you can see how it happened.
Well, they also too have to boil that down to an American audience that they perceive wouldn't grasp the legacy of it.
It also highlights how evil the Master is by saying that his quest for a new life, again, is seizing a new life, is murdering someone in order to take someone's life. We saw that with the beginning of the Anthony Ainley Master, and we see it again here with Tremas and then with Bruce, the Eric Roberts character being effectively murdered in order to continue the Master's life.
I always refer to the Eric Roberts Master as Bruce the Galactic Despot, because that's what he reminds me of. And real quick, I'm going to say this one other thing. I'm going to turn it over to Sue, who I would love for her to tell us about Yana and Harold Saxon. But there's one line in the Doctor Who movie that I love it every single time. The Master is in the TARDIS and he comes out and he says, "I always dress for the occasion." Love it. Pure 100% camp right there. Just amazing. I mean, I could see Jonathan Pryce delivering that. We'll get to that later. Sue.
Yeah, well, the Saxon arc starts really in the first series of New Who with the Ninth Doctor, and we see lots of stuff in the background. This character being mentioned, vote Saxon, and as things progress, we find out that Harold Saxon is running for prime minister and wins, and actually that's the master. Oh no! Shocking surprise.
There's no X in master.
Because of it's been a while, guys. I'm sorry. Because I believe of help from Yana and like Bluetooth devices, he's able to control the populace of the UK and turn them into himself. So by the end of, or I guess the climax of that story, the UK is flooded with masters to beat the Doctor, and he sticks around. The John Sim Saxon Doctor sticks around for quite a while, and sort of back to the very malevolent kill all humans master from the good old days.
All right.
Yeah, and I love though how Tennant very much tries to steer that conversation back to sort of the Pertwee master relationship. Like, come on, we went to school, we hung out,
Yeah.
And before the master starts flying around and eating sandwiches. I mean, I think that's very on target with that.
I should say that is just the first story. I mean, he moves planets around to destroy the universe. Like, there's a lot of interaction with Tennant and Sim throughout their years.
That's actually, I think, the first couple of episodes.
The first story, not so much the first episode.
Yeah.
And if there's any indication that you have mental health issues, it's that you're turning the entire world into yourself. If this happens, you need help.
But how much fun was that to play for him? I mean, come on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I love. Go ahead. I was gonna say I love how narratively they set up the entire Yana and John Sim master too, because we talked about before, they take elements from previous history and they just kind of lay them into place. Well, this one was actually set up way ahead of time with the fob watch that contains the soul or whatever, the Time Lord, the knowledge of the Time Lord, and we're conditioned throughout Doctor Who to find professors as respectable people. We don't usually, believe that they're going to be bad people. They may do bad things that lead to the destruction of the world, but they're still respectable people, right? And so, we get to Professor Yana, and it's like, okay, well, we're conditioned to respect this guy, and he's got the fob watch. Oh no, and then you kind of he did that really well with the switch that through, like he remembers it, and then
so good,
evil, and it was just brilliantly done, especially with being able to lay that groundwork for seasons ahead of time, and then finally execute it.
I wish we had more of him on screen.
Yes.
Having an actor as accomplished as Derek Jacobi does not hurt. It really doesn't.
I know that when they reintroduced the Master, they were trying very hard to draw a parallel with the Doctor. So, Derek Jacobi's costume is very kind of early Doctor-esque. The device he's working with is kind of console-shaped a little bit. When he regenerates into John Sim's Doctor, it's supposed to be like a mirror image of David Tennant, young and vibrant and full of energy, with his own companion and a laser screwdriver, because who would have Sonic? All those things that they were trying to do, and then it just shows that the strain of it all is just making the Master snap. Now, this is where I think I enjoyed the Sims Doctor, but the more they led him down the road of the drum in the head, it made it less likely that it was a little less sympathetic and a little more sympathetic, depending on how the stories go out, because it's almost like they said all of his villainy wasn't really his fault. The Time Lords did this to him, and you would go crazy too if this would happen to you. Kind of a thing, and so it was even more tragic that the David Tennant Doctor couldn't pull him back and find some way to say, hey, we're the last two around. We really can't afford this fight anymore. and try that. So it was real interesting. I mean, if you're gonna say the Doctor's the last of his kind, and then bring back the Master, and then immediately, then the rest of the time it's like, okay, is he going to be dead or not? Well, now I no longer believe that you can kill him. So there's less jeopardy when you write stories like that. So I don't know. It's a great character and a fun version, but this is where I think the show struggled with what to do with them.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, but if I can offer a slightly different perspective.
Sure, absolutely.
The first time I saw these series, I was new to Who. Like, I started watching with Blink and then went back to Eccleston and watched up to current, right? So I didn't have classic Who knowledge at all the first time I watched this story. And I felt, as a first-time watcher, again, without the backstory, that the sound of the drums was really well done and very menacing. And then when you find out at the end of that story, spoilers, right, that he will knock 4 times is not about the Master, it's about Wilf. It's heartbreaking.
Right. Oh, it's totally heartbreaking, absolutely.
From a storytelling standpoint, I think it was really well executed.
No, I totally agree with you when it comes to that. Absolutely.
Yeah, from a canonical standpoint, going back and looking at it as this repetitive, can you kill him? Can you not kill him? I can see that getting old. But like, I think for new watchers, for people being introduced to the Master and his whole deal, I think it was very effective.
Yeah,
and the canonical story side also plays out really well with his first death too, because he's wanted regenerations this entire time. He wants to live forever this entire time. When he gets shot by Lucy, and 10th Doctor saying regenerate, live, and it will hurt the Doctor not to, so the Master decides to die. Beautiful.
No, I totally agree with all that. I was just saying that after you leave this series, when he comes back later, when the Doctor and the Master meet again after this, then it's a matter of, okay, what version is this? Okay, and all that stuff. But the Giannis Saxon arc was very tight and very well done.
All right, I'm gonna go to Brian to bring in Missy because she's so fine. And just really quick, because everyone deserves all the attention that we can give them, all of the Masters. But we are starting to run short of time. We do have a little bit more space to cover. So, Brian, talk to us about Missy.
Okay, so Missy brings us back to the idea of the Master using a pseudonym and being undercover and disguised when we first encounter the Master, and introduces the idea of a female Master for the first time, which was very nice, and leads us towards this reveal of who she is, that Missy is actually the Master, and which I think was sort of a high point for that character. But not because it was impossible to tell beforehand, but because the reveal itself was very well done. Mm-hmm. And we go to sort of the, dare I say, the Mary Poppins Master of a different kind of charisma, but a fun charisma yet again.
I thought she was more Nanny McPhee but that's me.
I loved Michelle Gomez. Yes. I loved her in everything else I'd seen her in Green Room. But she was so brilliant. I wish she could have been the Doctor. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Jodie, but Michelle Gomez, she just had that little spark of madness down that I would love to have seen her play the Doctor.
I mean, Missy exists in the canon so that they could show us that genders can change during regeneration, right? That's the reason for her existence, to lead up to our woman Doctor. Michelle Gomez is phenomenal, absolute powerhouse. I personally don't love that they continue to call her Missy for the mistress.
Yeah.
Because historically, where that comes from, that is a subservient role to the master. So by giving her that name, you are immediately making her less than all of the iterations before her. And there's nothing preventing her from also being the master. She doesn't have to be Missy.
I thought that was kind of weird.
I was disappointed by that too.
Yeah, once the reveal was done, why they didn't switch, I don't know.
And what's worse is she says she can't call herself the master, which was just odd, I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand she wants to do sort of this rejection of all the previous versions of herself.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
I get that, that she thinks she's probably a different sort of way of that. I think, she is sort of the direct line from Delgado right to her. It's a straight line. But I still think that terminology just kind of doesn't work. I mean, I didn't think it was, I'm trying to figure out how to put this. I thought it confused an awful lot of people in a way it didn't need to confuse, but also for all the reasons that Sue mentioned as well.
And that reasoning doesn't really track in terms of the naming convention, right? If you want to reject everything that came before, you're not just going to choose the female gendered version of the word.
Yeah.
All right.
That's really the only thing I don't like about Missy is that her name is Missy.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to the current master, played by, and I know I'm going to massacre his name, Sacha Dhawan. And Scott, could you give us a brief overview of his tenure so far?
Sure. Well, a little bit more of the plans within plans master. I like the idea of the big reveal of yet another persona and stuff like that. I thought that it was kind of funny that what tips the Doctor off that this isn't who he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be this track star, right? But he couldn't catch up to the plane. But Ryan, who has a disability, who can't run, somehow made it to the plane perfectly fine too. A little weird, especially as far as continuity goes with all that. So I thought it was an odd character trick to be the one, as to why he's the master, right? What you don't? Never mind. Anyway, soapbox for another era. But
I've got one too, so you're fine.
But But as far as that goes, I thought that his performance was good. His motivations don't make any sense towards the end. It becomes, super crazy and cyber time lords and I don't know.
Yeah.
But as long as we focus on his performance as the master, I thought that it was the part that I liked was come on, Doctor, catch up. I liked that. There was a little bit of a personality that I seemed to recognize with that. That was well done. And unfortunately, I think the writing didn't, for the rest of the stories with him, it didn't help him. But there was nothing wrong with him. It was just, he needed to be given more time or something a little less grandiose. Just, remember when one Dalek could be deadly? That's what they need to kind of do with the Master again. And they did that with Missy towards the beginning, which was nice, and stuff like that. Make it more personal. And then you realize just how of a threat that the Master can be. But anyway, so yeah, there we go. We have a new version. We don't know where this one fits in the list, though, do we?
Not canonically, no.
No. Because the Time Lords gave him all sorts of lines during the Time War. It could be in the Time War Master, for all we know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Rob, real quick, and then we only have a few minutes left. We just have a few other masters to cover.
It's, again, like what he says, it's all about the writing, not the character. What drives me nuts about Hit This, and I'm willing to give him a break because I think that version of the Master story isn't completely written yet. But it drives me nuts that he mentioned he's been on Earth for 75 years, which means he's on the same planet as the Delgado Master. And he's not, two genius minds that evil aren't going to figure it just drives me nuts. Anyway, that's it.
Okay. All right. So we've talked extensively about the televised adventures of the Master. Now we're going to go briefly into some other media. We're going to start with the Virgin New Adventures and the BBC books, which had some really iconic Master moments there. Brian, I know you're familiar with those. Would you start us off with the Virgin New Adventures?
I'm not familiar enough with the Virgin New Adventures for that.
So sorry.
I've read a couple, but not the Master ones.
One of the ones that springs to my mind, it's called First Frontier, and it takes place in the 50s. And you have the Seventh Doctor and Ace, and they encounter the Master, who actually gains a new regeneration cycle from these aliens called the Vatoon, who are your typical Roswell, big head, big eyed, small mouth aliens. And that Master is more of a Lionel Rathbone-esque gentlemanly Master, like Delgado was. Then in the BBC books, you see a couple of iterations of the Master, but one that really springs to mind is, spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the BBC books, Gallifrey's destroyed, the Doctor's lost his memory. And he is in a dream where he meets someone that he knows that he might have been an enemy. At this point, the Doctor has a beard, and this enemy says, well, I can't have a beard because we're opposites. So if you have a beard, I can't have one. And that is the Master. All right. And I know I just did a lot of speaking there. So we're going to go to Big Finish, which hopefully everyone is more comfortable with. Yeah. Well, then how about we talk about the Alex McQueen Master, is the complete audio Master. I'm going to open it up.
He was so good. You had the Unit Dominion series box set, which introduced him, and you have questions about who he is, and he's ultimately revealed to be the Master. And the way that was done in that particular box set, it's one of the best "this is the Master" reveals that we've had, I think. Mm-hmm. It was really strong, and it gives us a Master who is unhinged and malevolent, but in a different way than we've had before, and makes him, I think, scarier than we had seen in a while. So it's for me with the McQueen Master, it's all about the performance that makes him.
He really brings home that you can't have slaughter without laughter.
Yeah.
All right. Big Finish, they also have a lot of other Master ranges. They just had their own 50th anniversary celebration of the Master called Masterful, which brings together all of the current actors who played the Master, including Alex McQueen, and Mark Gatiss, who played an alternative version of the Master from another universe, as well as John Coleshaw, that Master of Voices, who plays the Anthony Ainley Master. And I'm saying it like that because you need to go listen to it and find out why I'm giving it air quotes. All right. We only have a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to mention that there are a couple of things out there called Scream of the Shalka and Curse of the Fatal Death that have their own Masters. Can't really talk about it, but go find them. Those are both on YouTube. You will not regret looking those up. I want to thank our panelists. Michael, can you tell us a bit about what you're doing currently?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before with the Timestamps Project, I've been going through Doctor Who episode by episode, starting with the Hartnell era since 2014, and it's a weekly project I do, including Torchwood, Sarah Jane Adventures. I include Class as well, that kind of stuff. You can find that and so much more in my writing at creativecriticality.net.
Excellent. And Sue, what are you up to these days?
Sure. Most of the time you can hear me talking about Star Trek, another long-lived franchise, over on Women at Warp on the Roddenberry Podcast Network, where we explore intersectional diversity in infinite combinations.
Excellent. And Rob?
Hi. I can be found on neatcoffee.com and their podcast, also anglotopia.net. writing about Doctor Who, and then some of the Cosmic Press books for Alan Seiler, and a couple ATB books coming. And yeah, I'm on Facebook and Twitter under my name. That's it.
Excellent. All right, Dr. Scott.
Hi. So Dr. Geek's Laboratory is found at www.drgeeklab.net. .com. And on Facebook, Dr. Geek's Laboratory, look for us there. You'll be able to find us. And the Dr. Geek's Think Tank is our Facebook group where we try to be a little bit more interactive and mostly go to conventions where we talk about science inspired by fiction.
Excellent. And Brian.
I am on British Invaders, the podcast all about British science fiction television, where we talk about all sorts of British science fiction and related genre shows. We have covered well over 150 shows now over the past 14 years, talking about lots of things that no one else is talking about.
Yeah, it's yeah.
All right.
We
Well,
go pretty
guys,
obscure when we had times. We do.
thank you very much, guys. Y'all were all awesome. I do want to say that BritTrack can be found on Facebook at the BritTrack and Dragon Con. We are also on Twitter at BritTrack and Instagram at DC BritTrack. Just join us out in the group, which is the most active of our social media. We also are, during the convention, are going to have a YouTube channel, which I don't have a link for at the moment, but we will by the time this airs. So thank you very much, guys. I just want to say you were all awesome, and I appreciate every single one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so thank you, and thank you to Dragon Con. Hope to see y'all again in person or out in cyberspace. So.